We are going to go through a Zercher Jefferson's curl, but using the barbell. So this is like a classic Jefferson's curl. The only difference is that I'm going to be holding the barbell pretty much in between on the crease of my elbows. How I wrap my hands around will be entirely up to me. I would advise go with what feels most comfortable and supported. Now, like or differently from most Jefferson curl variations, this is very much going to be focused on spinal segmentation. So the first variation I'm going to show you is really avoiding anything coming from the lower portion of the body. So I'm actually going to demonstrate this starting from a top position, working my way down and then back up. And this makes it a lot easier to eliminate what happens below. And this is just because I want the exercise, the intent behind it, to be focused on this top portion. How well can I move all of this? Having said that, this will also mean the rep will actually be quite slow, and that is simply because there's a lot of attention focused on the fine details of moving all the vertebrae, and there being so many, it takes a little bit of time to perform this exercise efficiently for the desired intent. So I'm going to run through the first example, and then I'll actually explain a little bit of my thought process, what I'm paying attention to as I'm performing the exercise. So as mentioned before, I'm going to get down into a squat. I'm going to bring my arms underneath the bar into my Zercher setup. Then I'll deadlift the bar and start from a standing position. In terms of what I do with my feet, any sort of comfortable in-between deadlift squat stance will work for this. Knee bending, play with the degree of knee bending. For this variation of exercise, I've generally found for myself in majority, having a slight bend in the knees, maybe sitting back a little bit, playing with where you put weight on your feet during the exercise as well, and then modifying or adjusting that bit by bit will maybe help perform this exercise more efficiently. So explore a little bit a few of these different variables in terms of feet position, knee bending, where you're placing weight on your feet, i.e. leaning forwards or back a little bit. So I set up from here. I then deadlift the bar off ground, and I start from my neck, so I segmentally flex. And then what I'm thinking about doing is paying attention, trying to feel out between each vertebrae that I'm starting to open up. I'm trying to pay attention and feel out the connective tissues between the vertebrae and around the vertebrae. As the vertebrae open up, I should feel tension around those connective tissues. I'm trying to pay attention to how they tolerate the load as I slowly work my way through the spine. When I feel I've got to my end, I'll slowly start to come back up. Once again, I'm taking my time. I'm thinking vertebrae, my vertebrae, to slowly come back up. So it's very important that I move slow, primarily because if I'm starting to build the weight and I'm starting to use a challenging weight where I'm performing 2 to 3 reps at that sort of speed, the time and attention could all of a sudden become quite close to 2 minutes or slightly more. So it's very important to pay attention to how various connective tissues along the spine are responding and tolerating the load as I go through the movement. Are there any particular areas where I might feel very weak, or I don't feel the segmentation is happening as well? And that might be something that changes as you build the load. Now the second variation is actually to take the barbell from the floor. And this is where you could get a little bit more challenged by mobility, because then we can make it a little bit more global and involve the posterior tilt, involve using the lower limb. The only challenge with this is that if you're very tight hamstrings, you know you can't fold very well into this position, then setting up might actually be very hard, and it might put a lot of stress on the lower back depending on how your pelvic's tilted and from how you lift the bar. So if you are limited, one way to actually safeguard this setup is to start a bit higher up. So I would lift the barbell up, maybe as so, put a few plates, or take it from a rack that's got a slight elevation and perform it there. So to give you an example, from here what I would then do is I would get down, set myself up just like I did before, but then from here what I'm going to do is lift my hips up, open the knees into a position where I feel with what mobility I have, I decide where to shift my body weight on my feet, and then I perform exactly the same thing. So I'm using the pelvis slightly, but I'm also thinking about segmenting through the spine as well. And then on the way down, I perform the same journey as before. I'm segmenting vertebrae by vertebrae, paying attention to how all the connective tissues feel, adjusting weights forwards, backwards on my feet to still feel engagement on my spinal muscles. And then I'm starting to fold at the pelvis as I feel limited by spinal flexion. So that is the second variation of the lift, which is simply taking it and performing it from the floor upwards, so concentrically and then eccentrically lowering the weight. In my eyes, this is a progression for majority, simply because of the challenges it places on our mobility. So if you don't have great mobility, this is maybe not the exercise to be working on just yet, but it can be modified, i.e. taking the first variation or taking the second variation, and as I mentioned earlier, maybe elevating the barbell, working with lighter loads to begin with.